On this episode of What's Going On with Shipping, Chevron sets sail for Venezuela. Hi, I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. So, for 4 years, the United States has had sanctions leveled against the nation of Venezuela. But last month, the United States has issued a 6-month waiver to the company Chevron to allow it to begin trading with Venezuela for oil. And right now, 2 tankers, one which is going to load crude oil out of Venezuela and another that's delivering naphtha, which is essential for mixing with crude oil for sale of oil, is heading toward Venezuela. And I thought we'd take a look at that story, break it down, and understand what is the background and what is currently happening with these vessels. If you're new to the channel, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. All right, let's jump into this story. So for context, this is a story out of Oil Price, and the story says the oil market crisis sparked by Russia's invasion is nearing its end. Russia's invasion of Ukraine sparked a major market crisis, which we've been tracking on this channel for a long time. Energy prices have fallen back to pre-war levels, driven lower by fears of a global recession and weak oil demand in China. We also have had a pretty mild winter in Europe and in parts of the United States, and so energy production hasn't been in as big a demand as we've seen. Analysts remain divided regarding oil prices in 2023, however, with some analysts believing the return of China, lack of energy, will send prices soaring. I have of the contention here that because of the longer distance needed to ship energy, something called ton miles, this is going to cause the tanker market, particularly, to really see a boom. Now, the question is, does the energy market see the corresponding one? Go on here. Well, there's obviously something going on here because both Exxon and Chevron for last year reported record profits, over $100 billion in profits. And we're going to be looking at Chevron here specifically. So right now, the energy companies are doing real well, and 2 of the stalwarts in this, Exxon and Chevron, are doing extremely well. The story that we're talking about specifically is this one, posted in GCaptain via Reuters. Chevron sending 2 oil tankers to Venezuela under U.S. approval. I'm going to read just part of this story. U.S. oil company Chevron is sending 2 tankers to Venezuela, one of which will load the first cargo of crude destined for the United States in nearly 4 years. Jump down here just a little bit. The U.S. last month issued a 6-month license to Chevron, authorizing it to take the expanded role at 4 Venezuelan oil joint ventures that produce, process, and export oil to bring their oil to the U.S. The U.S. license will reopen oil flows that were shut by U.S. sanctions 4 years ago. The license was one of Washington's first steps to ease sanctions as an incentive for Venezuela to work for opposition leaders on a presidential election in late 2023. A Chevron spokesman declined to comment, citing a policy of not discussing commercial matters. Well, that's just convenient now, isn't it? Obviously, this has gotten a lot of attention because of issues with the Venezuelan government and the actions taken by Venezuela 4 years ago, and not allowing the seating of a duly elected president in Venezuela. This has caused sanctions between the U.S. and Venezuela, but let's understand what's underlying this issue. Because of Russian crude oil being boycotted and being sanctioned, there is a shortage of crude oil coming into the United States. And I know what you're saying, Sal, we're the United States. We produce tons of oil, probably more oil than we can ever consume. And you'd be right. And you go back and look at some of my videos, we talk about that. The problem is the right oil for our refineries, and that's the issue we're at. We don't have the right oil to put into all our refineries. And what we need is the type of crude oil that comes from Russia or Venezuela to be put into our refineries. Meanwhile, some of the crude we get out of the United States, especially this fracking crude oil, has to go overseas to be refined. And it's one of the big issues we have seen. So going back here, this is the report from the Committee on, the Congressional Research Service that goes a little bit into the details here of why this happens. And it deals directly with the 2018 presidential vote, where the president of Venezuela, Maduro, who had succeeded after the death of Hugo Chavez in 2013, basically did not allow an election to fully happen. From 2019 through 2021, Maduro resisted U.S. and international pressure to cede power and allow a transitional government led by Juan Guaido Guaido, excuse me, my Spanish is terrible, the National Assembly president elected in 2015 and once regarded as an interim president by nearly 60 countries to convene elections. It goes on here, despite a nascent economy recovery, Venezuela's economy contracted by roughly 75% from 2014 to 2021, exhibiting among the world's highest rates of hyperinflation, according to the IMF. While hyperinflation may have been technically abated, food insecurity and the collapse of health and other social services have left 7 million people in need of humanitarian assistance and led another 7.1 million Venezuelans to flee the country as of November 2022. And again, U.S. policy has basically been to sanction. But in November 2022, Biden administration issued a license to allow Chevron to resume some operations in Venezuela after the Maduro government resumed negotiations with the opposition. And this is basically the quid pro quo. To get Maduro to negotiate, we're going to allow Chevron to have this 6-month licensure to basically ship cargo in and out of the country. Now, whether Venezuela does this, that's a whole nother issue. We had a similar deal back during the Clinton administration with North Korea to get North Korea not to develop nuclear weapons. Well, that didn't quite work out very well. So Chevron is the company in question. Now, Chevron is an old company. It's one of the original 7 sister companies. And what I mean by 7 sisters, these are the 7 oil companies that really developed the modern oil system we know today. Now, the 7 sisters were unique in that, number one, they were basically all Western owned, U.S., British, and Dutch. But they were a classical, what we would call vertical integration corporation. In other words, they did everything from get the oil out of the ground, to refine it, to ship it across the oceans, to sell it at local stores in your communities. I mean, these are gas stations you would all be familiar with today. And to this day, Chevron still maintains a shipping entity. Some of the oil companies had basically divested themselves of their shipping, particularly after a series of high-level accidents back in the 1960s, 70s, and even into the 80s. Amoco Cadiz, Exxon Valdez, it really wasn't probably a bright idea having your name plastered on the side of a ship because it causes problems. However, Chevron has maintained a pretty large, robust shipping entity. And matter of fact, if you go through their site, you'll see a lot about their shipping entity. They still have U.S. flag vessels. Many of their vessels end in the name Voyager, so you'll see them out there. And if you're interested in a career in shipping, you could just click on here for a career in shipping with Chevron, which unfortunately seems not to be something they want you to do. So the other companies that deal this are these new companies that emerged post the breakup of the 7 sister tanker companies. And what you see today in the tanker world are companies that are involved solely in really the transportation of tankers. So if you look at the top 10 tanker companies here, you can see them. I did a whole video on this, which I'll link into the show notes here. But TK, Euronav, Scorpio, Frontline, DHT, Tsakos, Navios, SFL, International Seaways, Overseas Shipping Group, and Nordic American Tankers. And these are really the go-betweens. This got the oil companies out of the business of having to transport it and really created these kind of companies to do it. But Chevron still does a lot of their own shipping. So let's take a look at the situation specifically. So the ship that's been identified as going to pick up the crude oil is this vessel right here, Caribbean Voyager. And the Caribbean Voyager is classic tanker that you'll see. This ship in particularly, let's scroll down here, some information, built in 2019 in Korea, 4 years old, 115,000 deadweight ton capacity. The ship is owned by Tsakos Energy Navigation. That's one of those top 10 companies, but its manager is Chevron Corporation. So this ship is operating for Chevron right now under a lease. And when you pull up where the vessel is located, it's really interesting that we do not have a clear fix on it right now. This probably has a lot to do with the fact that there's no AIS transponders that are uplinking signals from the position this ship is in. The last time it dinged was on January 1st, but we know it's in port in Venezuela right now and loading crude oil. Not exactly clear where it's going to return to, but it will be returning to the United States with this load of crude oil from Venezuela. The other vessel is this one. This is the UACC Eagle. This ship was built in China back in 2009 at New Time Shipbuilding, which is a great name for a shipbuilding company, flagged in the Marshall Islands. Again, these ships are open registries. You see that with the ships involved here. 73,000 deadweight tons. It's loading a cargo of naphtha. This is a liquid that is mixed with crude oil for the refining process. And this vessel also last pinged, this time back in the Gulf of Mexico, back at December 28th, and is en route down toward Venezuela. We just don't have a position for it right now. And I think the big question here is the U.S. now has opened up the potential for Chevron to get back into Venezuela, raising a lot of political questions. Should we be trading oil, energy kind of policy from one dictator to another? You know, we were getting crude oil from Putin, but now Putin's in a bad place. So now we're going to Venezuela and Maduro. And the question is, does this oil geopolitics work with Maduro to allow free elections to take place in Venezuela? There's a lot of controversy surrounding this, and it's going to be difficult for companies and corporations to really deal with this. What's the backlash for Chevron in dealing with Venezuela? Obviously, they see an opportunity here, and if you think about it, it's a pretty good opportunity for Chevron. This is a short haul from the Gulf Coast of the United States down to Venezuela to go get this crude oil and bring it up to refineries in the United States. Now, they're not getting refined product. They're just getting crude oil at this point. One of the big problems Venezuela has had is their refinery capacity is terrible. You may have remember hearing stories about Iran shipping refined oil into Venezuela and Venezuela shipping out crude oil to Iran. Venezuela is awash in crude oil, but they don't have the refinery capacity. It's been a big problem for them. This is one of the reasons why UACC Eagle is bringing down that naphtha so that they can assist in the refine process for it. So a lot of issues at play here. Not sure exactly how Chevron fares with this. Is there backlash? There's a strong community in places like Florida, for example, that don't like the Maduro government. And, you know, will Chevron see a backlash about this in the state of Florida, for example? Will people boycott this, Chevron? Will states take action against it? I don't know. But this is the Biden administration opening up a 6-month waiver to allow Chevron to go in there. We'll be following it on this channel to see what exactly happens. If you are new to the channel, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, give it a thumbs up, and if you can, support the channel. How do you do that? Well, number one, you can hit that super thanks button down below so we can get as much profits as Chevron or Exxon someday in the future. Not going to happen. Or you can head on over to Patreon and become a patron of the page. You can support the page monthly or yearly, whichever way you'd like to. But no matter what, we appreciate you viewing, and please click that subscribe and like button. And more importantly, have a great and happy new year. This is Sal, signing off.